It's a very special episode of CNB that you're joining me on, and I thank you for it. I'm Siddharth Vinayak Patankar. This is CNB on the NDTV network, and we are coming to you this week from inside the Triumph India Motorcycles assembly unit at Maranello just outside of New Delhi. So you get a glimpse of yet another plant from us here on CNB, and while we talk you through that, the reason I call this episode special is not just because we brought you in here, it's also because we've got a very special car on the show this week. It's the car that the whole world press has been waiting for, and we've been one of the few people who've got a chance to actually access it. It's always like that with a Ferrari. This is the 488 GTB, the car that replaces the 458 Italia. I was in Maranello to drive the car and got the chance to push it on the track and also get it out on the road. It is not often one gets the chance to live his dream. And when it happens more than once, it gets extra special. That is how I still feel every time I go back to Maranello to test a new car coming out of Scuderia Ferrari. Goosebumps all over, every time. It's been exactly 40 years since Ferrari made its first mid-rear engined V8 Berlinetta. That was the 308 GTB. And now you've got this car coming into the market, and it carries quite a legacy. There have been some big models along the way, but with this particular car, the company begins a new innings. Why? The 488 GTB is the first of its illustrious family to get a turbocharged engine. And while many purists have been immediate and vocal with their disapproval, I am willing to give this car a fair chance. You saw it with the 360 Modena and the F430, and it's a similar case with this car and the 458. Styling similarities, so much so that you might think that, hey, is this just an upgrade? Well, it's not, I can assure you. And in fact, the company officials here have told me that the car doesn't share 85% of its parts with the 458. That's right, almost all of it is all new. The only obvious carryovers are, or the big ones that you notice anyway, are things like the roof, which is exactly the same as the old car. The most significant changes have been carried out to specifically increase aerodynamics, like the door handles for instance, and to increase downforce. I'll have more details on that for you in a bit. Inside, you get a more minimalist cabin, which you can customize and personalize to your heart's content with colors, stitching, and materials that you fancy. The lower dash, finished in red leather, is striking, as is all the carbon fiber trim on the dash, door panels, and central console that runs all the way between the seats. The F1 steering still houses all the controls, including indicators and Ferrari's now famous Manettino that allows you to change the car's driving character. The car also features keyless entry and start. F154, that's the new family of turbocharged engines that come to you from Ferrari. The first time you saw this family braking cover was with the California T, and of course Maserati will also use the same engine, but the most powerful iteration, 670 horses, that's the one that goes into this car. And remember that there's been so much said about the fact that Ferrari has tried to go into the turbocharged space, has left naturally aspirated behind. But the interesting thing is that when you speak to the engineers here at Ferrari, the number one goal while developing this new engine family was to make sure that the character of the engine is very naturally aspirated like. This is Ferrari's most high-performance engine ever. The 3.9-litre unit churns out 670 horses. That's 172 brake horsepower per litre of displacement, which is a new record for any Ferrari road car ever. The car has a mind-numbing 760 Nm of torque. By the way, peak torque only arrives in the 7th gear. It is artificially reduced at lower revs, and it's only in that gear at 3000 RPM that you hit peak torque. So otherwise, this car could potentially be even faster if you were allowed to access that torque lower down. But the Ferrari engineers told me it then wouldn't sound as nice as it does. Now, when you're aiming for sharp dynamic response from the engine, you've got to make sure that your brakes are on par as well, and so which is why the car actually gets the brakes that were first designed for the Ferrari. So the braking capability is a lot better, and your braking distance therefore is a lot better as well than the 458. The other thing that's changed quite dramatically is the 7-speed dual clutch transmission. Now, it's not just the fact that the gearing is a lot taller in this car. All 7 gears were actually redesigned simply to take on that new turbo system and just make the overall response that much more effective, and make the overall gear changes, both downshifts and upshifts, a lot faster. The car can go 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in 3 seconds and goes 0 to 200 in just 8.3. That is blisteringly fast. On the curving mountain roads around the Emilia-Romagna countryside, you get a great sense of how roadworthy this car is. It is extremely quick, precise, and yet comfortable. Never once overwhelming you to the point that you feel you can't control this steed. And therefore, it's perfect for everyday use and much, much longer drives too. As we drive around the beautiful countryside just outside of Bologna and Maranello, the one thing that always amazes me every time I come to this part of the world and get into a car from the Prancing Horse stable, the kind of respect you get from other motorists. It's not just the awe around the brand, it's just not the fact that people are going to turn around and say, hey, look, there goes a Ferrari. They kind of move aside, they make space for you, they'll always, kind of wave out to you. That's nice. They feel proud about the fact that this car comes from this region, and it really shows. After I was done driving for over half a day on the road, it was time to head back to Maranello and get onto the famed Fiorano track, Ferrari's own test track for its Formula One and road cars. I was told in 2005 that I was the first Indian journalist to drive on this track, so coming back here always brings back happy memories. The 488 was born for this mission and takes to Fiorano's curves with aplomb. On the straight is when you can belt it and feel its true power coming through, and also its high speeds. Product development at Ferrari always takes in a lot of inputs from Formula One, of course, but what's more interesting to me this time around is how much makes its way into cars like the 488 from other track-only or even road cars. On the 488, you get brakes from the Ferrari, the quicker steering rack from the 458 Speciale, and an even better iteration of the Speciale's SSC1. The SSC is the side slip control, and it's now called SSC2 in the 488, and while it acts via an electronically controlled limited slip differential, it's now less invasive. It also integrates with the car's F1 track and EDIF and controls the active dampers so that the car retains its poise even as you try and throw all caution to the wind. Exhilarating? Yes! Fiorano is a shade under 3 kilometers in length and is ideal to test the latest from Scuderia Ferrari, since it has its fair share of curves and bends. I had the car's manettino set to CT off, which means the car actually grants a lot of the control over to you. It is very generous in allowing you to slide about and yet snaps back to the intended line of travel with immediate alacrity.
The chassis is very forgiving and you get no sense of understeer. And this is where the turbo makes a difference, I feel. The slight lag and the extra dose of torque give you a more graceful entry and exit on the oversteer. And that is when you realize why Ferrari engineers have toiled away on turbocharging this engine. The chassis is terrific and the car becomes easier to drive and yet keeps you on the edge of excitement without scaring the wits out of you.
One key difference between this and the 458 Italia is downforce. It's 50% increased downforce on this car as compared to that one, and that comes courtesy some specific features and new ideas that have been brought in by the engineering team. Now you've got an F1 inspired double spoiler up front, as well as the aero pillar. What it does is just kind of makes the car, it sucks in the air and almost sucks the car down to the road, and you instantly feel it when you're driving too. The car just completely grabs the road, has terrific sense of control, and of course it's helped along by some of the features at the rear as well, including the blown spoiler at the back.
Not that I wanted to stop doing this, but reluctantly had to. And so I finally drove back into the pit lane after a cool down lap. It is never easy leaving a Ferrari behind. But this one has really impressed me, perhaps because it started out with a question mark hanging over its head. The turbocharged Ferrari V8 is a dream. The 488 GTB is a fun, precise and superbly engineered car that seems to do everything right. And it sounds great too. Now if only it could follow me home. It will launch in India in a few months, and never mind the prices, right?